For the good of the team, maybe we all need a chance to unwind.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, is the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City. And now, somewhere up in upstate New York, she's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
I'm feeling good. It's first week of February, and I feel like the year has started off well. We have an episode already in the books.
Hey, look, it was a slow start to the year with the Arkham Sessions. I totally want to own that. We just had a lot going on.
We are busy, and it's usually busy with stuff we're not allowed to talk about. So this is not something that is show related per se, and it's not stuff that we just can't really talk about it yet. So stay tuned. Maybe we can talk about what has been keeping us busy for so long. But we got away just for a short time. We took a one evening trip out of town. Do you feel refreshed, or do you feel like...
No.
I feel like the one evening trips are the ones that are going to get you worse. We should have gone the day before instead, but...
Yeah, anytime you have to fly out somewhere and then fly back the next day, I wouldn't say that's necessarily restorative.
Yeah.
But I had a blast. It was so much fun. We were in Vegas one night to see a show with a bunch of friends, and it was delightful. I don't mind the brief trip, especially if it's in Vegas. I mean,
and
how can you turn down Vegas? Yeah.
Speaking of that good company, I want to send out a congratulations to our dear friend, our brother in geekery, Todd Stashwick, for his very first Saturn Award nomination. The awards were last evening. He did not win for Best Supporting Actor in a series. You might know him as Captain Liam Shaw from the final season of Star Trek Picard. It's an amazing performance by an even more amazing human being. He's a dear friend of ours, and I want to send out congratulations to him for that nomination, but also for the big win, because Star Trek Picard Season 3 actually ended up winning for Best Series, and Patrick Stewart won for Best Actor, and Jonathan Frakes actually took the supporting actor nod. So I think it is so incredibly deserving. He has been a good friend of ours for a long time, and he's been a loyal listener and patron of the Arkham Sessions. So we thank him and congratulate him. And I just hope to keep seeing more and more of his performances, especially those that get nominated by awards like the Saturns.
We love you, Todd. Congratulations. Well-deserved nomination. And I'm not sure that losing to Jonathan Frakes is all too upsetting.
Yeah.
I know they're practically family, but yeah, what a wonderful night for them at the Saturns. And I'm sure there's much, much more to come.
He got to present an award with Walter Koenig, who's also an icon of Star Trek and a friend of Todd's and a neighbor, he even mentioned on the broadcast. And it was just a delight. It's always a delight to see good people doing good things. And so we're very happy for him. Speaking of people that we are happy about, we're always happy to hear from another dear friend, David Nett. He is the co-owner of Hero's Journey Fitness, a gym located here in Los Angeles that caters to geeks like us. If you're not comfortable going to the gym and hanging out with what is stereotypically thought of as like the gym bros. If you're not uncomfortable, or if you're not comfortable with that, you've got a safe place to go where they cater the workouts not only to your needs but to the needs of other geeks. They theme their workouts around cool, fun stuff like the X-Men. David sent us a SpeakPipe message in response to my mentioning Scott's portal eyes in the last episode. Let's take a quick listen to what David has to say. Here we go.
Hey, Dre and Brian, this is David calling. I'm calling to talk a little bit about our favorite subject, yours and mine. When we're not all talking together about Luke Skywalker, we're talking about Scott Summers, Cyclops, my other favorite hero. And I just wanted to add a little bit to some comments that you made in the last episode about Scott's eye beams, his concussive blasts. And while the modern explanation for those concussive beams is the one that's presented in the animated series, that his body metabolizes energy from the sun and then releases it in the form of these concussive blasts. The early explanation for it is what Brian said. But there's a little bit of a twist here. I think, I don't know if Brian purposefully didn't mention this because it's so silly, but Scott's eyes at that time were explained as portals to the punch dimension, which is a dimension of endless, pure concussive force, the punch dimension. There was a couple of early sort of books released that explained the powers of the Marvel superheroes, and that's where the punch dimension comes from. So when Brian says he prefers the original explanation of Cyclops' eye blasts, he's talking about his love for the punch dimension. All right. Thanks for a great show, as always, team. I look forward to the next one. Bye.
Okay, so yes, I did not mention the portal by name, or the dimension by name, the punch dimension. It is a little on the silly side, but you know what? When you hear David describe it, it sounds even cooler. So I'm just going to keep using references to the punch dimension whenever I have an opportunity. David, by the way, might be one of the most knowledgeable people I know when it comes to the X-Men. He's been reading the books a lot longer than I. And when I got out of X-Men comics, he continued. So all the stuff I'm not up to speed with, David is the perfect reference.
He's an encyclopedia, but it's much more than being able to have that rote memory and just know it. I think he has a good sense of the characters and their relationships and the journeys they've been on. So there's a much deeper, thoughtful process that I think David's involved in when he talks about the characters with us. And I've received so many graphic novels and comic books from him when I express my, I don't know, honestly, my ignorance or just like a gap in my understanding of X-Men narrative. So super cool. David, keep the messages coming. They're helpful for me. They're educational, and we love hearing from you. So yeah, wonderful note. Thanks for that.
100%. And now we also want to reveal that it has finally happened. We might be behind in the game, but we are in the game. The Arkham Sessions has officially launched our TikTok account. So if you are on TikTok and you want to check out the Arkham Sessions, come find us. We are at the Arkham Sessions. It's interesting because I'm a 46-year-old dude that doesn't do a whole lot of social media. Maybe I'm not the right person to be on or behind the controls of TikTok, but I'm having trouble following people. We're like, I'm finding people to follow.
Literally, you have to explain this. You're literally having trouble following people.
Correct.
When you click the follow button, it does not work for you.
That's the part we should mention. It's not that I don't know how to do it. It's that TikTok is not allowing me to do it.
I wonder if there's some kind of measure in there or some some
Do I have to wait
generational
a certain
block.
amount of time?
But no, I would just wonder if it's like, oh, Brian Ward looks
Right.
up your history, and then it's like, yeah,
Maybe he shouldn't be
this
following
is for your
people.
own good. You don't know how to use TikTok, and you never will. So
It
blocked.
let the Arkham Sessions follow one account that we know, our friend London Jackson of History of the Batman. But then every time I try to follow other people, it's like, you're following. And then if you refresh, it's like, you're not following. And so it's weird. If you are a TikTok user and you know what's going on, if this sounds familiar to you, please reach out to us. You can do so on Instagram at the Arkham Sessions, on TikTok at the Arkham Sessions. You can find me at B_Ward028 on Instagram and on TikTok as well, where I'm not necessarily having trouble following people. I'm following a few people there. But anyway, if this sounds familiar to you and it's something that you know how to fix,
help us.
We're ready. We're
We'll help
open
you.
ears.
I know how to use TikTok. I've been following and unfollowing people all along, but yeah, I can't figure out I really did try, and I cannot figure out what the issue is.
Yeah. Or even come to our Discord and let us know there. That's something we'll
hang out
talk
in the
about
Discord.
later for sure.
Good plug for the Discord. Lots of cool conversations happening. Shout out to my Discord fam. It's free to join. Hop in and hop out as often, as frequent, as long as you need to. Really low key.
They're keeping the conversation going over there.
For
Even
sure.
when we're taking one night trips to Las Vegas, we come back and people are talking to each other. It's like, it's a perfect little community. So
And there's stuff that I'll put in the Discord that I won't post anywhere else.
yeah.
So
Yeah, come to our Discord.
So Brian, a few episodes back, we had mentioned the concept of trigger warnings. Do you remember that conversation?
I do.
And I think I've said a couple of times on the show that the concept of a trigger warning is something that I don't necessarily agree with.
Yes.
I have said that a disclaimer that, in the media world, any kind of acknowledgement about content and the themes that someone may encounter in that medium is fine. And I support, you might be aware of the current practices that the film and television use to address these content warnings.
Sure.
So I agree with that. When I say that I don't agree with trigger warnings, what I mean is that I wasn't familiar with any research that gives evidence that providing a trigger warning helps people manage the media that they're watching or helps them cope with the media that they're consuming. And the distinction that I made was a content warning or themes listed or some kind of disclaimer is generally helpful, especially for caregivers and parents figuring out, is this something that I'd want my kids to see? Is this something that I want to be aware of? I've mentioned on the show that I do not care for any kind of animal abuse or neglect. And so and actually there are rarely, I don't think I've ever seen any kind of content warning for that material. I'll see something like mature content or something, or violence,
adult themes.
Yeah. But I'm usually not ready for that content. Anyway, having said all that, it's the word trigger that I'm less comfortable with, in the sense that it's become ubiquitous and many people use that language. And I think folks have got it twisted a little bit, because the concept that I am worried about being misunderstood is that, well, if there's a warning, that means we've covered it. That means that everyone had a chance to know what the content is and manage their emotions or their emotional reactions. And
to at least brace themselves.
That's kind of the
get
idea.
Get ready, it's coming.
And so and the word trigger is a clinical term. It's also a conversational term. I understand that. And I worry about the overuse of that and people misunderstanding that. For folks who actually experience triggers, who actually have emotional responses due to a past trauma and have post-traumatic stress because of their experiences, a trigger is categorically very different. than a strong response to something. Now, I did my homework and I did find some recent research that covers this.
Okay.
And so I wanted to kind of circle back and talk about this very briefly. I will say, Brian, something that you said is really interesting. And
Finally,
I
it's
want to credit you.
More than 200 episodes.
But I am looking at an article from a journal, Clinical Psychological Science, which is a very good journal article. I mean, it's right up my alley. And this was published in 2023. So this is fairly, for research, this is hot off the press, very recent, meaning that, finding anything similar to this within the last few months is going to be rare.
So before you continue, and because you're talking about this already, talk about that a little bit. Tell us the process.
Oh, no, I don't want to know.
No. But
well, let me put it this way.
So if you talk about new research and newly reported data, what has happened to get us to this point?
Yeah, I think, and I know a lot of our listeners know this, that articles and thought pieces you might see from other types of news publications are much more current.
Yes.
So I'm actually looking at this article. It's a meta-analysis of the efficacy of trigger warnings, content warnings, and content notes. Really interesting, right? And the paper was completed in November of 2022. It wasn't published until summer of 2023.
Because it has to go through reviews and...
It's a rigorous process, reviewers, feedback, adjustments. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that further additional research is conducted. It simply means that elucidating the findings in a comprehensive and usually limited form, like a journal article. It takes a lot of work, several authors, lots of circling back. It's really iterative. It's a really lovely process. I say that in the sense of, if you've never done this before, it's really developmental. You learn a lot about how to write better, how to be more concise, how to speak in psychological science language, which I think is a good exercise for people who are in the field. But it can take a long time.
A bad exercise if you're not in the field.
Yeah, but it can take a long time. And so I didn't look up the details of when this research was conducted.
Okay.
The other thing, too, is that a meta-analysis is a collection. It's a distillation of the existing individual research or group research articles that have already been published.
Okay.
So research that's already been done in this area, and it collects all of that and distills it into main findings so that we no longer have to say, oh, findings are mixed, or there's all this research out there and it's still unclear. So it kind of does that work for us.
Well, now I'm very interested to know what I said that was so interesting that these articles may have touched on.
You have, without even reading any of this research, you've come to really awesome conclusions. Last thing I want to say before I talk about the conclusions is that the oldest paper that was reviewed was 2018. So we're talking about...
So it's research that's all
recent.
Fairly recent. I mean, but when did
We've
when did
only
content
had,
warnings and
yeah.
trigger warnings like really become a thing? It was probably pre 2018, I'm guessing. But interesting. Okay.
Yeah, interesting, huh? So this is what I first want to say,
Okay.
and then I'll talk about what you brought up, which I think is maybe the more interesting part about these findings. All right, here's the one-line conclusion. Existing research on content warnings and trigger warnings suggest they are fruitless, although they do reliably induce a period of uncomfortable anticipation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which is what you said.
Oh, that's what I said.
What you said.
Okay.
Now, the responsible very last statement in this article says, of course, additional research needs to be done, further investigation. This is not the end all be all. It just means, hey, nothing we found says that the trigger warning creates any different response in audiences. So in other words, whether you have a trigger warning or not, somebody's going to react the way they're going to
be
react.
uncomfortable, right?
And what they did find, or not uncomfortable,
Well, okay,
right?
right.
So in other words, the trigger warning had no mitigating effect, not effective. What was interesting is that anticipatory anxiety did go up, and that's captured as the feelings that happen between the trigger warning and the uncomfortable content.
Right.
So it's almost like you're bracing yourself or you're stressed about what you're about to see.
Which in my mind is worse or potentially worse than suddenly coming across that topic in whatever you're reading or watching. The constant anticipation, waiting to be uncomfortable, is going to be worse than the discomfort that you may have experienced the moment that you saw something and didn't expect it, right? Like if you're watching a movie, Drea, for you it would be animal cruelty. Let's say
Give me a warning, please.
let's say
What are you gonna say?
112 minutes into a 120-minute movie, there is the death of an animal, and that is upsetting to you. But if you saw a trigger warning at the beginning that said there's animal cruelty in this, for the next hour and 20 minutes or hour and 15 minutes, or 150 minutes, whatever, you are now
for
sitting there waiting.
I might have this just visceral anticipatory experience, just waiting for this. Anytime I would see a creature on screen, I'd worry that something will happen to it.
Right.
So you are right. You were right in your guess that, hey, could the trigger warning actually have kind of a negative effect on people?
Could a trigger warning be a trigger itself? Yes, is sort of my...
Yeah, that's what your idea was. And they didn't necessarily explain it that way. Of course, it was this idea that anticipating something upsetting is upsetting.
Yes.
The other thing that I think is important to think about in this research is that we don't exactly know why trigger warnings don't work. And the meta-analysis that I looked at suggests that it might not be that the trigger warning itself doesn't work. It might be that it just says that it's happening. It just says that, hey, this is what's in here. It doesn't give, and nor should it give, but it doesn't give any help toward coping with what you're about to see.
Right.
So it's like kind of...
That was my point too,
useless.
when you've brought up in the past that being warned and and sheltering yourself from these things aren't necessarily helping with what you're feeling when these things happen. You can't just run away and hide from it. And I'm not saying you should run directly into the line of fire to try to expose yourself to as much, we're not talking about flooding here of whatever your traumatic, whatever it is, but it's potentially as unhelpful or unhealthy to actively avoid the things that make you uncomfortable than it is to be uncomfortable in that moment.
That's right. So then I would probably suggest that there could be some value to a trigger warning if we, and by we, I'm actually not sure who this means yet, but that we are helping people develop self-regulating skills and understand what it's like to encounter the kinds of things that might be disturbing.
Yeah.
And so I'm never going to say, okay, it's ineffective, let's get rid of it. I think what I'm trying to say is, well, we're onto something, but what responsibility do we have to go a little bit further and help people manage what they're about to see? That might be more in my field than yours. In other words, I don't know that Hollywood should be accountable for this.
Yeah.
But
I do wonder what the experiment was, like do they,
Yes, good
I
question.
imagine that there are electrodes and there are things that are on them in order to measure your pulse and
let me tell you,
whether
so
you're perspiring or.
It's super interesting because all of the studies included in this meta-analysis involves Professor X coming in and wiring up your brain and no, I'm kidding. No.
But I do wonder, if you talk about control and tests and all of this, inevitably there must have been oh, you're about to read this thing, trigger warning. This could have such and such, and then as this person is reading or watching or whatever, they're measuring. Oh, they're getting a high heart rate. Oh, they're starting to perspire a little bit more. Their body temperature is rising. The further they get to the end, the more they're now clenching their chair. And then it doesn't happen. What if there was never any of that? And then it was did maybe the fact that you were warned in the beginning actually did the work.
And you're right. To answer your question, there are in many of these studies self-report measures, so people can use a standardized measure to express how it is they're feeling. And they also have physiological measures, so they're looking at all the things you just said. It's something else that I'm thinking of, and I know our show is not about this, but as you were talking about that, it also made me realize, because of the way that human research is conducted, every subject has to have kind of an opt-in. You will know generally what the research is about. And I wonder if that also, it's a very selective research study or set of research studies. People can opt out if they decide, I don't want to look at disturbing content, so I'm out.
It's like polling data at this point, to some degree, where they say that polls aren't necessarily as accurate as they used to be because most people don't say yes to, would you like to take a survey anymore? If they call you up, you ignore the phone call from a person you don't know. If you are asked, hey, I'm from this data collection place, would you take a poll? Most people are going to say no. I don't have time. Oh, I'm rushing out to a meeting. Oh, I'm making dinner.
Yeah, and to be
whatever.
clear,
So,
the difference is that usually there's some kind of compensation involved in research involvement because you're volunteering to spend your time doing it. So, but to maybe to both of our points.
But if you're told ahead of time, this is what it's going to be about, you might go, yeah, I'm not into that and I'm out. And so the data might not even be as good a data as it could have been if this had been in the golden era of science where they didn't tell you anything and they just let the experiment roll.
In fact, they gave you the trauma.
Yes.
And
those were the best.
You
those were
and
the
then
best days. The best days.
That's not happening. But really cool research. I'm actually going to drop the full PDF, the PDF of the article in the Discord. So folks in the Discord can download it, check it out, read it, have a conversation. I also said the name of it so anyone can Google it, but that way folks have access to it.
Yeah.
Really interesting stuff. Again,
there is an entire channel on our Discord, by the way, that's specifically dedicated to health and wellness, mental health and wellness. And it's when you then start talking about some of the stuff like this. So I imagine that would be sort of where you could find it.
It's perfect for that. And again, sometimes any kind of research, in general, psychological research can be hard to access. And it's behind a paywall, or again, it's just stuck somewhere in research in journal articles that don't allow access unless you're spending a lot of money trying to get to it. So this one, thankfully, is free and it's interesting material. I think it's helpful to know these findings. So kudos to the authors. Just really cool stuff. We'll keep that conversation going in the Discord. And Brian, well done. You get another degree. I'll give you another degree.
I feel like
for your suggestions. And I hate it when, well, let me be kinder. I do have a strong reaction when people say, well, why did we need research to determine that? And it's because just guessing, just conjecture is not a
Well,
is
that's
not
literally what a
neutral, objective,
hypothesis
safe way to
is.
do anything. Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's one thing to speculate as to what the outcome could be. It's one thing for me, layman Brian, to say, shouldn't it be obvious that people are going to get triggered over triggered warnings? It's another thing to then go and conduct the experiments to determine if what you just thought was common sense is actually happening.
And remember that there are individuals, I was asked to be one of them for Netflix, to go through, review this content and categorize disturbing material and how challenging, I turned down that work. But how challenging that can be, we would definitely want to know how effective, how needed, how impactful those kinds of thematic warnings are. So it does matter. And I think the last thing I'll say about this, I'm not sure if all of this will go in the show. Maybe we'll have this as a bonus clip somewhere on TikTok. But what I'll finally say about this is any single person, regardless of whatever the research says, your own personal reaction to how you consume media and the choices you make, that's your prerogative. Please don't let this determine, make any decisions above and beyond the personal and very specific individualized reaction that you have to media. Again, I have a very specific reaction that is really never studied or never looked at in this way. So you gotta do you.
Yeah. I feel like we should start talking about the show a little bit. I will say that this is the perfect episode to have a long preamble ahead of it, because it's a pretty straightforward episode about jealousy, about being in someone's shadow, about and it starts opening up the doors to what could happen in future episodes by introducing this concept of, well, we'll just say Genosha. And I applaud Eric Lewald, the story editor, for within your first season tackling a subject like Genosha. And we don't really know what Genosha is at this point yet, but I am happy that they have decided this is the story that they're really going to attack in this first season.
Can you tell folks a little bit about Genosha? And I'm saying this because in this introductory episode about Genosha, we don't learn too much.
Yeah.
But I have heard Genosha mentioned. I know a little bit about Genosha. Mm-hmm. What can you share about Genosha that's helpful to just give us foundation for this episode?
What am I allowed to say? If we're following our own rules and we can only really talk about what we know up to this point, not what is coming, I will say that what is coming is a big deal. What we know about Genosha now is that it's an island off the coast of Africa. It embraces mutants. It makes this big declaration that you can come here and you can get away from the political strife and all the turmoil and trouble of what it means to be a mutant. We have our arms open.
Okay, so it is sanctuary.
It is a bit of a sanctuary, and the way that it's presented in this particular episode is that they're going to what appears to be something of like a resort, like a vacation resort, and Gambit, Jubilee, Storm. It's just those three, right? Gambit, Jubilee, and Storm decide to go to Genosha and check it out.
And it's Professor X who gives them this instruction.
It's Professor X who gives the okay on the recommendation of Gambit. Like, Gambit is clearly hitting burnout. He is tired. He needs a vacation. He has heard about this place called Genosha. He wants to go check it out. And in fact, I think Scott is also hitting burnout, because Scott and Gambit, when we're introduced to this concept, they are mid-argument. They are, Scott is being sort of the antithesis of what we know Scott to be, which is typically a very level-headed leader. And in this case, he's ready to tear Gambit's block off because he is talking about giving up. He is talking about getting out of the fight for mutant rights and instead just going and living on an island, potentially, where he is welcomed. And that's not what anybody wants. They want a seat at the table. They don't want a separate table to go sit
And that
at.
right there already is a heavy theme.
Yes.
Do we work to gain equality and visibility and acceptance in our world? Or do we make a home somewhere that's, as I'm hearing you talk about this, pretty much guaranteed to be safe?
Right.
Or marketed,
Marketed as safe.
propagandized to be safe?
We can't talk about that yet.
Okay.
Maybe.
I have seen, I did see, sorry, I peeked. I saw a poster in a comic, and it shows, it's letter heavy. So it's just mostly message. I don't think there's a lot of images of mutants or anything. And it says like, the grass is greener, you'll find haven here, everything's perfect, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So because there's propaganda, it seems like there's a public message. This is, at least in what I saw, not necessarily a secret. People are aware of Genosha.
Yes, it's becoming more. It's becoming more like Scott. Clearly, at the beginning of this, like Professor X hadn't even heard of Genosha necessarily, because Gambit is like, what? I'm just saying, I heard a thing and I think we should go check it out. And then Professor X is like, maybe you should. This does sound interesting. And he sends them on their vacation.
I could just feel those neurons, those super neurons firing on like my own little experimental island.
Just like his practice there could just be crazy successful. He could just start probing everyone.
So he's sending his folks out to feel it out.
Yeah,
and
they are sent on a mission.
They have to go in disguise. They have to
Right.
pass, and he sends.
Which Gambit does not.
You don't think Gambit
Gambit is wearing his same uniform. Like Jubilee is, she's in her swimsuit. Like, she's not in the yellow coat and the pink and the blue shorts, and she's not in that outfit.
Right.
Storm is not in her outfit. Gambit is still wearing the trench coat, the sort of armor plated thing, the head cowl bit. Like there's no question that guy's a mutant.
Maybe he's just cool.
Yeah, maybe he's still got the gloves with the.
And you know what?
The
Something
fingers.
tipped off the clerk or the, what is that?
I'm recreating Gambit's
look like
fingers.
claws.
He's got the little gloves that have the fingers.
What are you talking
here.
about?
Gambit's gloves.
I have never seen this or heard of this before.
Gambit's gloves are
Like this?
no. There are five fingers, but his index finger and pinky don't have fingers.
They're fingerless. All you have to say is you have to say fingerless gloves.
But the whole thing isn't fingerless. The middle fingers, the ring and middle finger, are black. They have fingers, but his pinky. I guess maybe it helps him hold the cards.
So that was my question. What's the function of that?
I think it's just meant to look cool.
It looks so cool, even though I've never noticed it before.
Yeah, you've never noticed it before, but just thinking about it makes it seem so
just thinking about
cool.
it. Okay, so
You were mentioning the clerk. We should mention that they show up and they're in their beachwear and ready to go, except for Gambit, and they're checking into their hotel, and a camera scans Storm's face, and it brings up footage from her at the New Salem Mall that we saw in that first episode where they find Jubilee at the mall. And that then tips off the clerk behind the counter that these are mutants, and he dials up a number on the little phone and says, just so you know, we've got some, they're here, I'll take care of it. And then tells the mutants, I've got the perfect room for you. You're going to love it. So we know that there's something sinister going on. We just don't know what yet. And that is where we are sort of left. At the end of this episode, we see that they are being collected, that it's almost like a heavily armored police force has come to grab these 3 X-Men.
Right. There was like militia, the Sentinels, these like, who are the...
like heavily armored craft, ships and cars and vehicles and soldiers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty disturbing. I had actual chills when they used a to detect Storm's mutant identity. I just had a strong, like, wow, that's so creepy. And all the things we had been saying about passing.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the lens of just like public observation.
Yeah.
I did not think about these other ways, these technologies, these really nefarious, awful procedures that they can use to detect.
Wow, you actually bring up a really good point in that our whole previous episode in Captive Hearts, it was all about passing versus not. And when they believe that they're passing, that's actually when cameras are like, no, we know exactly who you are and we're going to capture you.
Well, and we're also onto you for passing. Like, we're ahead of you.
Oh, you think you can get away with looking like a human? Yeah. Yeah.
It's really violating. And she didn't know that happened. Storm didn't know that they were detected.
Yes.
So
we know it as the sort of third person omniscient, that we know that she was scanned, and we know that they have footage on her. But it does make you wonder, though, would it only detect someone who has like news footage of themselves out there? Like, oh, these are the rambunctious mutants. But if you were Jubilee pre episode 1, Night of the Sentinels, would she have appeared, or might she continue to pass?
But some folks have been registered.
Well,
right?
that is correct. She would have appeared because she's been registered. Yeah.
So that's the other piece here, is that the Registration Act is leading to the unfair discrimination of mutants.
Yeah.
And everyone was right. Well, the X-Men were right. Some of the X-Men were right to note that this policy would be harmful to them. Yeah. It doesn't help them. It facilitates the persecution of mutants.
Yeah.
We don't get too much of Genosha, though. That's like what we just said was basically
that's it. It's setting up a bigger plot line for the series. I imagine the next episode is really going to dive in heavily into Genosha, and I want you to keep that in mind. The A plot of this episode is Wolverine, after having gotten angry over the relationship between Scott and the love of his life, Jean Grey, he has decided to leave the mansion. We talked about the photo that he keeps by his bedside of Scott and Jean, and he rips it in half, leaves the mansion, and now we get to see where he's gone. I want to ask you this, and I think I've probably already tipped my hat. If I were to ask you, who is the most peaceful mutant you can think of at this point? Or let's narrow it down to the most peaceful of the X-Men. Who is the most peaceful of the X-Men that you can think of?
The two that come to mind are my blue guys, Nightcrawler and Beast.
we've not met Nightcrawler here.
Okay, so
but Beast, I would say you're absolutely right. But then I would also say Wolverine. Everyone thinks of Wolverine as being this rage monster, but what they don't necessarily think about is how often we've seen Wolverine be the voice of reason, and be the guy who doesn't want to get into the fight. Now, when he does, he will rip you to shreds, but he will actively try not to fight you.
Here's how I understand that, because I'm not arguing with you. I don't think he's the most peaceful X-Man. I can't say X-Man because there is an X-Man of the X-Men. But what I would say is I agree with you that he is he's nonviolent.
Right. I'm not saying he's a pacifist.
It's hard to find the right language. So
there's a dichotomy there with his character.
He respects someone's agency. He respects their bodies.
Yes.
He respects their values. He doesn't impose his ideas. He'll say his own ideas.
Yeah.
He'll express where his positioning is, but he doesn't impose. He doesn't violate others. He doesn't. And so far I haven't seen him try to overpower others.
Yeah.
He understands relational.
Yes. And rather than get into a fight with someone that he disagrees with, he would rather, in a huff, leave the situation.
And make the car a convertible.
Correct. But he'll leave before he does anything else. Yeah. So he won't get into the fight with Scott, even though we've seen him puncture the photo and rip it in half. He's acting out the only way he can behind closed doors in his own bedroom. But then he decides, I gotta go because I might get rageful here and I want to avoid that. So he actually physically leaves the facility without telling anyone he's going. Because let's be honest, telling someone that he's going is just going to make it worse. They're going to try to get him to stay. They're going to try to get him to do something he doesn't want to do.
And that's not his goal.
And
his goal isn't to be retrieved.
Totally.
Yeah.
So he goes out into what appears to be like Alaska. It's in the middle of the tundra somewhere. And this is why I say that I think he's one of the most peaceful, because even dating back to the comics, and I realize that we've not talked about this, but Wolverine is at his happiest and his most comfortable when he is in a community that tends to be peaceful. So he spent a lot of time in Japan. We know from some of the comics, where he just sort of lives, and that's exactly what he's doing here in the tundra. He is rescued. We saw that he was traveling alone, and then he is ambushed by Sabretooth.
I like to say he sniffed out.
He's
Sabretooth.
But not snuffed out.
No. Just, I don't know that you can snuff out Wolverine, but you can sniff.
He tries.
You can sniff out Wolverine, and boy, have we tried. My understanding is this is either Canada or Alaska, right? Because this is...
it is Canada. It is Canada because Wolverine is Canadian. He's gone back to his home country, yes.
And at some point, I know you're getting to this, he does encounter Sabretooth, and he also encounters a small indigenous community who are Inuit individuals who are essentially like a fishing camp, a fishing community.
Correct. Yes. And when given the opportunity, so he avoids death and he is rescued by the Inuit community. They bring him back to their camp. He questions where he is, but then once he realizes that they have taken him in, he then becomes a prized member of the community. He does not let on that he is a rage machine. He is helping them fish. In fact, he is doing better at what they've done their entire lives than what many of them are doing at this point.
Yeah, there's a really interesting interaction where a group of fishermen go out and they have these nets, and these are their traditional fishing practices, and they make assumptions that Logan is going to be very green, and they try to teach him and give him some warnings, like, by the way, they kind of pat him on the head. You're not really going to be that good at this.
Yeah.
And he excels. And my understanding is that, first of all, he's lived long enough to try all sorts of things. And second,
and he's from here. He's from Canada.
Yeah, he's been up here. He knows the land. He knows the environment. He knows the ocean well. So he already has these skills. And it's his way of demonstrating, at no point did I get the sense that Logan was saying, hey, I'm just like you. I'm just like, the generations of this community that has been here. But I think what he's saying is, or what he's trying to convey is, I adopt your practices. I respect your culture. I am not trying to impose mine on yours. And by no means am I an expert of your culture, even though I know what it's like to live among you.
Yeah, he adapts their culture. You just said it perfectly. He is not trying to impose his will on others. He never pops his claws to catch fish by stabbing into the sea. Instead, casts a net like everyone else and is either successful or not, just like everyone else. And he is trying to live like they do, and clearly they're a very peaceful community. And I get the sense that if Sabretooth not come into the picture and basically run amok in the village, he might still be there today. He might have been adopted by this community, or Logan, being Logan, is going to thank them and continue wandering off like Kane in Kung Fu. Like he's going to just go from town to town, Inuit community to Inuit community, or whatever.
Like Superman in Man of Steel.
Right. He's just going to go from place to place. And so, but I've always had this feeling that everyone believes that Logan is
an aggressor.
Is an aggressor,
like
and
a
is
troublemaker.
Monster. But think about it. Even dating back to, let's say you never read the comics, even dating back to like that first X-Men movie.
Yeah.
Where clearly Hugh Jackman's portrayal of Wolverine, he's got something boiling underneath, but he's also fighting the urge to pop the claws. He is fighting the urge to get himself into any position where there might be trouble. He is actively trying to help Rogue because he sees that she's someone in need. He is someone who I firmly believe is probably meditating every single morning and maybe even every night before bed. He is someone who needs to be centered and needs to help others. He might do it in a violent way, but more often than not, he actively tries not to first. And that to me is why I say he might be one of, if not the most peaceful of the
good dissertation. I approve.
That's a great way of saying, Brian, you're talking too much.
Not at all. I think your point's well made. It's one of the reasons why I really like Wolverine as a character, because it's just really challenging to fully capture everything that he's about. And you're right. A lot of people want to, minimize him to being this alpha bro. And he's just not. He's a very lived person with a ton of experiences that has impacted his worldview. And when I say worldview, I sort of mean that. He's been around. He's seen a lot of things. I think he's seen a lot of bad stuff too. And he doesn't want to perpetuate that. I think in no way does he want to harm. He has no interest in harming.
Yeah.
But he strikes me as someone who's basically like, his concept about about mutants rather is, I just kind of want to be left alone and I want to leave you alone. I don't want anything more complicated than that. I don't want to take what you have. I don't want to be necessarily a part of everything you have. I just kind of want to be free.
Yeah.
And I think that's that becomes loud and clear in his messaging. Sadly, his past catches up with him, and it's unfortunate that he can't be in community with this peaceful group. Sabretooth, who's hunching around, gets fully erect. You see all 20 abs, and he's ready to go. He's like fully abbed out, aggressive, in the Sabretooth style of, I cannot put down our history. And frankly,
and Wolverine even says, I'm tired of fighting with
like,
you.
let's just stop.
I don't want to fight you anymore. Can't we just not? And Sabretooth's like, no, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
Tries to blow him up, finds him having survived in the frozen sea, then throws a giant chunk of ice at him in the hopes of ultimately getting him to either drown or get trapped in the water, which will then eventually freeze, and Wolverine will then die that way. He straight up says your mutant healing ability is not going to save you from drowning and freezing in the water. Can you imagine how long Wolverine must be able to sustain himself with that mutant ability until eventually the cold just overtakes him?
I suppose he could freeze.
Right.
Is that what you mean? I suppose the freezing effect is much more. It's quicker than his healing factor, and so,
which I imagine is like metabolism based or something. Yeah. So it's going to slow him down.
It requires like warm functioning. It requires blood flow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So luckily he's rescued by the fisherman. He's taken in. Much
of the rest of this episode, though, is sort of a battle between the two of them. It's an iconic fight. There is a character who has sort of been propped up as the alpha of this village. He was the best fisherman. He was, he was the alpha bro. And
I think that up until now, he's had the respect of the elder, who is a symbol of stability and peace, and the idea. And I know this because later in the episode they have to move, but I think the idea is sustainability. You know, we don't fish more than we have to. We aren't trying to grow out it. We're just trying to stay here in a peaceful way.
Yeah,
and it's Keoic who is the individual who ostensibly will take on that leadership role and then be the elder of the next generation.
Yeah, you can see him being that future leader. And when Wolverine comes in and actually starts doing better than Keoic, it becomes clear that his future is now in jeopardy. He is now struggling with his own identity. Am I actually as great as I have always thought and been told I was? Or am I just the best that we have here, and now this guy is just coming in and, you know, beating him at everything?
Yeah, he feels very threatened.
And it becomes that classic case of jealousy, and now suddenly he finds himself in the shadow of someone better, and he doesn't handle it particularly well. He runs into Sabretooth. Sabretooth threatens to kill him until he realizes that the two of them have a common enemy in Wolverine. And Keoic then sets Wolverine up. He says, let's go fishing, or let's go hunting. We're going to go to the hunting grounds, get into this canoe with me. And the two of them go off into this boat. Wolverine knows something's up. He can smell it, figuratively and literally, probably. He knows that he is being set up. And Wolverine says straight up at one point, okay, let's knock it off. Like, let's cut the BS. We both know we're not going to the hunting grounds. We both know that this is not what's intended. Tell me what's going on. And when they get back to the camp, they see that Sabretooth has come in and destroyed it. and the people are gone. And while Keough thought that he was setting Wolverine up to be ambushed and killed by Sabretooth, what he's actually realizing is that Sabretooth's mission is to destroy everything Wolverine cares about. And in this particular case, it's this community. Mm-hmm. So Keough was wrong, learned a very valuable lesson, and now the two of them are going after Sabretooth. And
Sabretooth does the most villainous thing according to decades of film and television storytelling, which is, I'm going to tie everyone up basically on the train track. There's no train track, but it's on the bridge. Yeah. Which I understand is one of the passages. It's one of the ways that they get to the community. He's tied everyone up on that bridge and then placed bombs on either side. And by the way, is this weird to you that, and I'm not judging the writing, but I don't see Sabretooth being a bomb guy. I don't know enough about Sabretooth. But even when Wolverine was crossing the bridge in the beginning and Sabretooth's like, I'm tired of tracking you, and he blows the bridge up, I'm like, that's not how I saw this going down. Like, why wouldn't they just go at it claw? Well, they've done that so many times. My understanding is he's really had to kind of dial up his methods, because the claw to claw combat has been ineffective. He really has to go toward more powerful, more insidious measures. That's my understanding. I've always seen it as, and you're very possibly right, but I've always seen it as they've always been stopped from killing each other one way or another. And if given the opportunity to, in the middle of nowhere, just do it, they would probably get the chance and one of them would come out a victor, or they might both perish right there, which would be, fitting for this particular relationship. By the way, I said Victor, and if you know, you know. But yeah, it seems weird to me that this particular Sabretooth is very explosive heavy. I think maybe each ab is a little piece of C4. And he's just he get all the bombs? He's just taking, because he's not wearing anything. So he doesn't have clothes. He does have clothes. He's wearing a skin tight suit. You think he's naked? Yeah, he's wearing a skin tight suit that's like yellow and brown, and it's got the fur at the top. I thought that is his fur. That's him. All that's him. That's not him. The fur's not him? The fur's him. I don't think. Why would he wear a suit with fur? Because he's Sabretooth. Well, but why would he? But he's not running around naked. You know that, right? You know he's not running around naked. He is wearing clothes. Even if the fur is just his back hair, he's wearing, like, he's got brown gloves that have the additional little blade claw thing here, and he's got like. Look, he has accessories, but he's not wearing clothes over his fur. What? He is wearing clothes. He is? In the same way that Wolverine's wearing clothes. What are you talking about? I don't know. He is in a skin-tight outfit that shows off every ab and then some. But I thought that was him. I thought that was all him. You thought he's just yellow and brown. Like, you thought he just has a... Brian, he's a mutant. Oh, that's his mutant. That's his... No. He is wearing clothing. I need to go back and study a little bit. I thought that was him. You're just going to stare at a bunch of images of Sabretooth. I thought he was like Beast. No, he is not like Beast. Okay, I need to like squint harder. So that's... Maybe don't squint so much. Maybe just open. Oh, I see. He's wearing clothes. Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the fur is, but I don't think so. I think the fur is like a big fur like I think it's a collar on what he is wearing. I don't think it's part of him. Okay. Now I'm going to be checking to see if we ever see him. You do have the book. You have the quintessential X-Men animated publication that will tell us, show us, explain to us. I mean, it's not going to tell him that it's not going to tell us, by the way, he's naked. Footnote. Sabretooth, FYI.
By the way,
Sabretooth
Beast is not naked
naked.
either. He's wearing, he wears like little pants, little underoos or little shorts.
Yeah. He
Yeah,
usually
he-
has like a little spandex shorts.
He's got some shorts.
Yeah.
Well, Sabretooth's also wearing spandex.
But otherwise, I'm not saying he's fully naked. I'm saying that all of that fur, all of that is exposed. That's him. That's his body.
I don't think any part of him is exposed except for his face and his hair
mutant-
up at the top.
What mutant would be like, oh, I'm going to add fur to my already odd looking figure?
Think of him like Kraven in the Spider-Man universe, where he's a hunter and Kraven has like the big mane of the lion's mane that's up around him. I think that's what we're looking at with Sabretooth. I don't think Sabretooth has cut out a section of his clothes so that his back hair can like flow over his clothing.
So you're saying he wears...
Because he has short hair
So
up
you're
top.
saying he wears back hair? Why?
He's wearing
That's
fur.
him.
He's
No,
wearing
that's
fur.
his body. That's his fur.
Maybe. Hey, you know what? Listeners,
Okay.
let us know. Let us know down below. Wherever, if you're watching on YouTube, let us know. Is Sabretooth basically naked? Is all the fur his, or is it part of his clothing? Is he even wearing clothing? We want to know. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of it. Discord, you tell us. What do you think? We'll reveal it in the next episode. So, wow, where do we even go from here
I
in the
don't know.
conversation? Okay.
We're wrapping up here.
Yeah.
Of course, Logan, actually with the work of what would have been his new adversary, he is now working with the guy that was basically going to backstab him. So he's working with him to free the community members, and everyone survives. What's interesting though is that the elder essentially says, we aren't going to rebuild this. We can't. And also
Time to go.
The younger folks are suggesting that it's time to join the folks in the city.
Yeah.
So there is historically I think a message here about when our land is overpowered, is destroyed, is infiltrated, whatever we want to say about that. Once our land is no longer our land, we have to make choices, and this is one of those outcomes.
And that's the really sad part, is the elder even says that he feels like this part of their culture is now gone, that it's over. They will no longer be a roaming tribe of nomadic folks living off the land and fishing. They're now going to go live in the city, and they're going to, this is now over. And it's because these two,
I love this writing too, because it's almost a building a little bit of it's building a little bit of story for us that we're going to come back to.
Yeah.
Because Genosha is also, right, supposed to be a place, a reserve,
Our land.
a sanctuary, a place for us.
Yeah.
And it won't be touched, and it won't be taken, and it won't be colonized, however you want to say that. And so I love that. I don't feel that this was random from the writers. This could have been,
and they've done this all
intentional.
all along. Every time you think you're watching an A and B plot, it turns out that those two things are in some way connected, and we're watching the same thing but told from different tiers.
Yeah.
It's setting up a lot, and I'm glad that you picked up on that. It's setting up a lot. This next episode or two, if not the rest of the season, is going to be a big deal, and I'm looking forward to covering that.
I've gotten a few notes from folks saying, well, can you talk more about certain characters? What about the backgrounds and experiences of individual characters? We have talked quite a bit about Logan and Scott, and we're working with what the first few episodes is giving us. And, I want to make a commitment that I will definitely talk about the psychology of some of the other characters that we've not yet had more rich, dynamic, detailed conversations about.
As soon as we start to see those rich, dynamic details, we will then cover those characters a lot more.
I'm really confident in this this show, not our show, the Arkham Sessions, but
we've been around a while.
No,
we've done. We've done okay.
I'm confident in X-Men Animated. Like I feel like they know what they're doing. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah,
we will eventually get there. But I appreciate the notes and the questions and the anticipation, the eagerness to talk about more characters, and I'm excited to eventually get to that.
Me too. Dre, until then, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on TikTok at Dre Letamendi or Dr. Drea. You can also find me on Instagram, Dr. Drea Psychology, on X as Arkham Asylum Doc.
Right.
And if you don't want to bother with any of that, and just go to my website, drdreapsychology.com.
And you can leave us a SpeakPipe message like David did right there at that website.
Hey, if you have thoughts about Sabretooth, leave us a message.
Yeah,
I
tell
will
us.
Play it. I will listen to it.
As long as it's family friendly.
Yes,
we'll play it. I don't want to hear your other thoughts about Sabretooth and his back hair. You can find me. I am on Instagram at B_Ward028. You can find me on TikTok, B_Ward028. You can find us both on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions and on TikTok at The Arkham Sessions. Come follow us on Facebook. Join our Patreon, where you can get all kinds of additional content, some video behind the scenes. We got some things coming up very, very shortly. And then you can also get a shout out like these good folks are about to get here. Thank you to Aaron Wenrick, Mike Ficklin, Dr. Jerome Anderson, John Henry, our good friend Antonio Lopez, Kevin Ortel, Todd Stashwick, Hero's Journey Fitness, Frank Muller, Mark Pepper, Trevor Schwartz, Swara Sali, Rachel Acevedo Hoffman, Dr. Girlfriend, and my father, Carl Ward. Thank you all for making this episode and all of our episodes possible by donating just a little bit of money. $5 gets you a shout out on the next episode. So come join our Patreon and our Discord. As we mentioned before, it's entirely free, and you can have all kinds of great conversations with us and fellow listeners and Batman fans and X-Men fans and Star Wars fans and Star Trek fans. They're all there ready and waiting for you to have conversations with. So come do that. And then join our family over at Fanbase Press and check out their podcasts and also their news articles and their fantastic comics. And so, yeah, that's us. Until our next episode, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.